I am pleased to welcome for a conversation today, bassist, producer, uh, all around good guy, Tyler Mitchell. How's it going, my man?
Fine. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me on. Yes.
It's a,
Yeah.
it's a
How's
pleasure.
everything?
It's good. It's good, man. It's good. I just got a chance to check you out last night with the Spike Wilner trio. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, man, sometimes I see pianists, uh, Bill Evans in old photos, when he would play piano, he would have his head down almost even with like the piano strings. He said he could hear better when he was that close. And I watch you sometimes when you play, you'll have the bass kind of pivoted over, to your right, and your head is really close to the fingerboard. Does it help you to hear the instrument better in embracing it, that way? Tell me about that.
Well, I've been kind of doing that for a while because most of the time I played acoustic. I wasn't using the amp that much, in my beginning, in my formative years, but I can hear the bass. I can hear it better when I have my ear next to the strings. And because I don't usually try not to look at it, I try to use my ear when I'm playing. It's just because it's acoustic and there's no frets there, so it's a habit that I use. That just I can hear it better when I'm right close to it, and we kind of like embrace it.
I love
Yeah,
that. I love
yeah.
that, Tyler. Man, I want to ask you about Chicago and how you got started. That's such a great city, man. And I know your Chicago experience was probably different from mine, although there's, some overlap because the arts, continues and evolves. But man, when you were growing up, who were some of your first influences and how did you get into the music?
Okay, well, I got into the music real young. My father was a famous artist in Chicago, a muralist, Catan Mitchell, and he did murals all over Chicago. But growing up as a kid, as long as I can remember, I was always listening to jazz. When he painted, he had the record player playing stacked up. He would never put the records back in the jacket. He just stack them on and started painting. So I listened to, after a while, I knew John Coltrane or Eric Dolphy, certain people, Miles Davis. They could ask, he'd say, "Hey Tyler, who is that playing?" And that would be Miles Davies. I would say Miles Davies or Eric Dolphy. So I was listening to music, and my father knew a lot of these musicians too, like Raphael Donald Garrett, who he went to high school. He went to high school at DuSable with many of the greats. I guess Johnny Griffin, John Gilmore, Clifford Jordan. The list goes on and on. So it was a music teacher there named Captain Walter Diet. Everybody studied under. He was like a really like a taskmaster. He was like really tough on the musicians, and most of them all became famous. And like I said, the list goes on and on. So Clifford Jordan and my father, for example, were really good friends. But so was Donald Raphael Garrett, who played with Coltrane and played with a lot of people. Anyhow, they came, they would come to my house. And my father, one day he was at home and Donald Garrett came by with John Coltrane. And I was like 4 or 5 years old, but I remember this experience. Coltrane coming to our house, and my father sketched him at one point where he was in the chair, kind of taking a nap. He had his music strap around, saxophone strap around his neck, and he sketched a little pencil sketch. And then Max Roach, a lot of these guys, because a lot of them bought art from my father. So I started hearing music long before I thought about playing the bass. This goes back to the beat. So it's in me. Those tunes like Giant Steps and all that, I was hearing them when they first came out, when they were brand new tunes. And never thought that I'd be playing with the drummer, Art Taylor, much later, but that's how I started on the music.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And we're going to get to AT. We have to get to AT. I want to hear about AT. But I just think about Chicago and I think about you. Chicago is tough and they have amazing roots in bop and swinging.
Right.
They also have this experimental side that is very creative and that has lasted. And I feel like, man, that is you um, down to the T. And I want to ask you how you really started as far as deciding that maybe the bass was the way that you would go, and maybe what was some early indications artistically of kind of how you felt about the music? You seem to have a really open perspective about what the music can be.
Okay, well, this is how. Well, Chicago, it was the beginning of everything. Before New York was the scene, Chicago was the scene. You know, Louis Armstrong, everybody, they went through Chicago before they came to New York. But then eventually the scene kind of got quiet in the jazz and bebop, to me, in my opinion. There was only a few, the greats that stayed. Everybody was trying to go to New York. But then when the art of AACM, when they started their whole movement with Bout Hall, Richard Abrams, that opened up a whole nother scene, you know, which is, I think, is some of the greatest musicians in the creative avant-garde, and all that came from Chicago. That's where that started. And when I first, when I first started playing, Chicago was it still is a blues town. Blues kind of took over Chicago to me. You know, it's like, that's where the blues is really like going strong. And then jazz is a little bit more, the experimental side of the jazz is more popular than, it's not too much bebop and stuff to me. Like, I worked with Von Freeman for a long time before I came to New York. And he was one of the last of the Mohicans, keeping the tradition alive, right? Oh man, but then at the same time, I lived in this musicians building in Chicago on the South Side, where everybody lived in this all the musicians lived in this big what do you call it? Call it a courtyard. You got a lot of apartments all inside of a little. Anyhow, that's when I got a chance to meet Don Moyer, Malachi Favors, a lot of guys from the AACM and from the art ensemble, and they kind of took me under their wing. And so I was trying to play bebop. Like, I worked with Von, I got the job with him, and then when I thought, because I could play the blues and rhythm changes, he hired me because he had a session every Tuesday at the El Matador on 75th Street. So he heard me play a few times, but I was only playing the blues or rhythm changes when he call up he call us his horses. I'm gonna bring my horses up. My horses bring, because he would do all singers and all that stuff and play his whole set first. He'd do a whole set. He would be killing. Then he'd bring all the singers up and they would sing. Then he would bring up the jam guys to jam. So I didn't know about that part of the set when he hired me. So when I got there and started playing with him, I was okay. I didn't know most of the tunes he was calling. And then when he brought the singers up one by one, I didn't know nothing, man. And I was just feeling, and John was so nice. He was like, everything cool, baby, everything cool. And then he was like, all right. He didn't even like really fire me. He just said, I'll be in touch with you. Everything is cool. That blew me away. So I went home and I started shedding, learning tunes and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So like a year or so later, about a year later, I came back and played with him. And that time I knew my shit. And he called me and I worked with him until I moved to New York. After that for about 3 or 4 years. But the main thing I wanted to say was it was a strong avant-garde scene. And those cats embraced, they embraced me. So I started working with so many different names. You might not never heard of them, but there was Bobby Miller. Anyhow, it was just so many, and it was like the free jazz, and he was like where I could just supposedly do whatever you want. You know what I mean? It was like, that's how I took it. So I was playing, but even then, every now and then somebody would call a tune. So I had to do. But that's how I got my chops strong and got my ear open by just playing with a lot of the avant-garde guys. But between the two, eventually I realized it's a challenge. It's an art to both of those. The free jazz is not really just playing anything like, it's just an art to that, which I get to later, because when I just recorded with Marshall Allen, after playing with him for 20, 30 years, he's a master with, when he's playing free, it's a structure in this free, and I just did a recording with him. I'm so proud of it, because even the songs that we created, on the spot. You would never know that we had never played it together before and didn't have no chart. That's how we were in tune with each other. Because I hear a lot of these guys now playing free and all this. It's just a lot of angry noise and just, everybody getting together, blowing. And that's not what it's about. It's about like really tuning into each other, so everything is going to be different. A lot of the guys playing a lot of free shit. Everything sounds the same, and it'd be like I hear anger and all this other stuff. I don't hear the beauty and the happiness, but you have to listen to some of the stuff I just did to really relate to what I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm looking forward to hearing it, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it. And I love the point you make about just the variety and the scope of the avant-garde. It's not just one thing. And I really want to hear this record because, again, Tyler, with all your knowledge and wisdom and being able to play changes, the way that comes out and playing free is just, you're just drawing on your knowledge base, man. That's the way I hear it. It just comes out in random, different ways. But you made the move to New York, and it's really interesting that you matriculated some with Von Freeman. I got to meet him before I left Chicago. He was really nice to me. And one of the things he told me was, yeah, man, a lot of the guys, a lot of my peers, they left for New York. Gene Ammons, he left, and he called a lot of other names. He's like, I stayed and I helped to develop, the young talent. But you made that move too. You decided, man, you had to come eastward. And I'm wondering, when you first got to New York in the 80s, it was a different scene than it is now. What did you find? How did you first start getting around?
Okay, well, when I was right before I came to New York, I used to hang out and play with a guy named Crucinatine. He was a wild kind of guy, but he played flute, he played alto, and he just loved sunrise and free jazz. He could play a little melodies and some straight ahead stuff, but he loved Marshall Allen. This is long before I didn't know who Marshall Allen was. He was like, how Marshall Allen gets into like screams and script. Anyhow, he loved him. And but we used to play in the street in Chicago, and then we do some little tunes, little stuff he knew. Pink Panther, he had little melodies. And but his real thing was going out and playing free. And we didn't do that in the street. And he was also a magician. He was a really good magician too, but he drank a lot, and it's a whole nother story I can tell you. He came to New York, and like he told me, he said, when you get to New York, because he knew I played both, free and out. He said, the avant-garde guys are going to embrace you way before the bebop cats do. They go watch and see. And I didn't believe him at first, but when I got to New York, he and I came here together, and it was in the end of December of 1984. It was cold and shit. And this Barry Harris had his jazz culture theater at the time. So you could hang out there all night long because it was all, they had the sessions that started midnight to 8 in the morning, shit like that. Anyway, so I was hanging out on that scene, and I was also playing like out in the street. This is back when I played in the streets. It was with Vincent Herring. All these guys are like great right now, but you wouldn't believe we played in the street together for quite some time. Don Brayton, I could go on and on. But we had a good, what was that guy's name? Trumpet player. Anyway, I played out, so I would do that. Then I go on the Lower East Side, which is where I was living. When I first got to New York, I was with my friend Crucinta. He said, and he was just fast and hip, and he said, you got to come down here and meet Dennis Charles. You ever heard of him? He was a famous drummer. He played with Cecil Taylor. He played with Steve Lacy. Yeah. So this is on the Lower East Side in 1984. And back then it was live down the Lower East Side. I mean, it was a lot of heavy duty with drugs and everything. Like Thompson Square Park, you couldn't go in there like you do nowadays. It was unbelievable, man. It was so low. But then at the same time, they had all the lofts around there. What's his name? Had his loft. Ribby, what's his name?
Sam Rivers.
He had his one. There was another one called neither nor. And I was working there with a lot of guys when I got here. You ever heard of Jamil Moondog?
Yes, yes. Just passed away, unfortunately. Great musician.
Yeah, I used to play with his big band. I used to work with Billy Bang. That was one of the main guys, violin player I was working with down there. So we would be making money off the door. So I get up and play in the street with these cats, Vincent Herring, and all, straight ahead cats, and make some money. And then I go play on the loft scene, and then I work late at night after midnight at the Blue Note for $15 a night. It was playing like the late after the main attraction ended. They have a jam session band that would play whenever they finished till 4 in the morning. It was, they stopped at 12:30. We start playing. They stopped at 3:30. We play till 4. It was $15. But I got a chance to see all kind of great musicians at the Blue Note. And that's how I was working there with Ted Curson, working there with quite a few people. But that was my day, from playing in the street, then the loft scene. I put all that shit together. Maybe I might have about $75 every play, like 12, 16 hours, But so eventually, like when I work with the bebop guys, or I work with Barry Harris a couple of times, I would be more like the substitute. If the money wasn't good, or if Ron Carter or somebody couldn't make it, then I would get called. Whereas when you play with a lot of those free musicians, if you was a bass player, this and that, you was a bass player, period. It wasn't all that, they call you for the bullshit. Excuse my language, call you for this, but then they call somebody. So I ended up start working with Sun Ra back then through a friend of mine. He introduced me to Sun Ra, and the guy Danny Thompson, who just passed away. He was the straw boss, so he was one that did all the business with Sun Ra's band. They were playing the Sweet Basils this week. Mm-hmm. Now I was working at the Blue Note, that late night thing with Ted Curson, trumpet player. And for like $15. So this guy, Danny, he came into the Blue Note when I was in there like early. He said, man, Sun Ra heard about you. He wants you to come and play with him at Sweet Basils. So, and then he said, he slipped $100 bill in my hand. And I'm saying, damn, I'm getting 15 here. And I'm going, and he just gave me Sun Ra. So anyway, I ended up just packed my bass up and went on over to Sweet Basils. And that's how I started playing with Sun Ra. And he already had a bass player. He was using 2 basses and 2 drummers. And it was so crowded on that stage. I was like, I had to move for people to like this, for people to go to the bathroom, Anyhow, but that was my beginning with Sun Ra. And he was going through a period of doing just standard tunes, and putting the Fletcher Henderson arrangements around the stuff. So it wasn't a lot of tunes. It's like I joined the band back again in 2011 when I came back from Mexico. I had to really like learn all over. I never knew a lot of his book. He was doing mostly Gershwin and Irving. He was doing standard stuff. And when I was playing, I made 3 records with him, and it was pretty much just a little bit of free stuff. Mm-hmm. But then now that Marshall Allen is doing it, we started doing all his compositions and all Sun Ra's. Like I did all Sun Ra and Marshall Allen compositions on these records.
That's amazing.
Anyway, getting ahead of myself, man.
No, it's good. This is good because you took me right where I wanted to go with the Sun Ra situation. I have always heard that he was a taskmaster. He was very disciplined. Like you mentioned, Fletcher Henderson, he knew music from A to Z, especially in this improvisational lane. But tell me about how his rehearsals were at that point in the 80s. How did he prepare you guys?
Well, he was always like really, it's like he's he's got a house in Philadelphia, which Marshall Allen still stays there. And in fact, Marshall Allen's father sold Sun Ra that house for $1. Back in 1966, 67, okay. Because his father had a few houses in Philadelphia, and they came there from New York. They'd been living, and from before that it was Chicago. But the way he rehearsed every day, he like, and a lot of guys lived in the house too. He had a big house. John Gilmore, Marshall Allen, I could go down, but it was at least 7 or 8 guys living there. Then he had guys just coming. But he rehearsed every day. And you really couldn't get around that shit. Cats be trying to tiptoe out there. You wouldn't know, and he would practice all day. See, I
Wow.
never lived in the house, but,
Okay.
but I heard so many stories about that. And then I used to come to Philly and make rehearsals with him when I was in the band with Sunrise in 1980. I got the gig, let's see, I got the gig with Sunrise in 1985, sometime in the, it wasn't that long. It was my friend Crescentine was right though. That was the guy. Those was the people that really free, the so-called free jazz. I don't really think his stuff is so free no more. Sunrise.
Right.
When you hear these tunes, man, he just has an area that he does do it. He stretches out. He has a way of really improvising and making other musicians do things, that they never thought they could do. But he still had a lot of compositions and they were really tricky and hard, and it was all written out.
Mhm.
His book is amazing. I
Yeah.
have I haven't got nowhere close to, I think I recorded about 25 of his songs. That ain't nothing.
Yeah.
He got these songs called Discipline 27, Discipline 29-2, Discipline 99. I mean, he's got that's how much writing he does. That's
That's
just that's just in the discipline department, yeah. Yeah, but he
exactly.
would curse the shit out of everybody all day. And that's why I said I couldn't live in that house. I mean, I want to rehearse, but shit,
It seems tough. It seems like a tough road. And he was all music. But that's awesome. You got that opportunity. It just feels like and looks like your gifts and your preparation really made room for you. You're the perfect bassist, for a band like that at that time. And right around that time, you played with another one of my heroes that I really wish I could have just shook his hand and told him how much I appreciate him. And that's Art Taylor. Art Taylor was just something else, man. How did you meet him, Tyler?
all right. I met Art Taylor. He was well, first of all, he was one of those kind of guys really proud. I guess I think his family was from the West Indies or whatever. He grew up and he was born in Harlem. And he was a sweet dude, but he was a real disciplinary, really, really sophisticated, really you couldn't just go up to him. I mean, you couldn't just hang out. He was real selective, you know what I mean? In a way kind of could even be considered kind of arrogant sometimes. It could be kind of like really, but he was a wonderful guy. Where I met him, well, the first time I saw him, he was at Sweet Basil. I mean, no, the Village Vanguard. And believe it or not, he was on the stage. He was playing with Sunrise Orchestra.
What?
I tell you,
Wow.
he just came back from living in Paris and in Belgium for 20 years or more. And moved back to New York. And he said he was trying to get his chops strong. So he decided to work that week at the Vanguard with Sunrise Big Band. He didn't even want to get paid. He just wanted to just go get his chops together. And that's what he told me. And I just met him, and I was trying to talk to him, but it was just like, nice to meet you, and that was it. now let's see. Like about a year goes by, and my friend Mark Carey, Mark Carey,
Yeah. Yeah.
we used to live together, but before we was roommates, he called me up one day and he said, "Guess who I just got through rehearsing with?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Art Taylor." I said, "What?" I said, "Where?" He said, "He lives in the building next door to my building, up in Sugar Hill." I said, "Man, who was on bass?" He said, "There wasn't no bass player." I said, "Man, you got to hook me up, man. Just hook me up." So next day he called me. He said, "Art Taylor, we're gonna rehearse. I told him about you. We're gonna get together tomorrow. So if you make it," I said, "I'll be there." So I said, "What tunes he likes to play? Tell me something about him." He said, "Well, he likes this tune. He likes strolling. If you put this certain kind of pickup on the bass, And so I said, "Okay," I wrote that. He said he smoked a little weed. He likes that good weed. I went and bought some good ass weed. So I came up to his house the next day, and I was ready. And he was a nice cat, and we started playing the song. I don't know, remember what it was like, something like CTA, Jimmy, because he'd do all the tunes from his contemporaries like Jimmy Heath and Johnny Green. He played with everybody. He's on everybody's record, you know what I mean?
Right.
Oh man, so we started playing, it was fast, and then he started taking eights, and he started taking fours, and he started taking twos, and I was on it, and he just said, bam, you got the gig. Gig, I didn't know it was a gig, I just come in the jam, you know? And that's how we hooked up, man. We became really close. In fact, he was my best man when I got married.
Oh wow. Wow,
Yeah,
that's really hip. That's
yeah,
hip, Tyler.
he was really cool.
Man.
He was my best man, and he met my father when I first, but for the first gig we did was at Birdland, and then my folks were still alive. Then they came to, my father came to New York, and
Um,
him and Art Taylor got really tight. Art Taylor gave him his book, and then my father was like saying, look after, my son, take it. Anyhow, so when I did start fucking up, a few years later, sometimes he was like, man, your father told me, I gotta be keep an eye on you, man. So, because he was like my brother, but at the same time, he was like my dad and my uncle or something too. He wasn't, I can tell you some stories about him, man. He was a funny dude. And so, but he was like really, he and I had a connection, man. I really feel that way because like I used to ask him like a lot about Paul Chambers and different guys, but he and I had a connection. So even if he kind of did some funny shit, about to make a mistake, whatever, he always knew I would be there with the beat. And I never let him down. You know what I mean? He could count on me, and he even said so. Like sometimes he tries some shit, and it's gonna be a mess, but bam, I would be on that beat with him all the time. So he felt that comfortable with me that he wouldn't even go to Europe after a while without, unless he could bring his bass player, with him. You know what I mean? Because he still worked in Europe a lot. So me and him went to Europe and did the Bologna Jazz Festival in 1990. And everybody was at the everybody was at this Bologna Bebop Festival. It was the last. A whole lot of cats was at the same place. Some of them never even met each other. Like I had a picture once: Walter Davis, Walter Bishop, Kenny Drew, and Barry Harris.
my goodness.
It's like was named Kenny Drew and Barry Harris. I don't think they had ever even met each other before. They were in different circles. Never met all these guys. Johnny Griffin, Sal Nistico. Oh man, I could go to Jackie Mack. I was there playing with Jackie Mack and AT, and then all the piano players. So he had all those guys just about come to his house before we went to Bologna to rehearse. Like when I made that record with him, Mr. AT, he had Jimmy Heath come over and show us, the songs and write the perfect changes, the Gingerbread Boy he had Randy Weston come over and show us the correct changes to High Fly. I mean, he had the actual cats come and show us these songs, Greg. I mean, can you ask for more?
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing, man. Wow. Well, now I know why that record is so good. I mean, that beat that you guys established is just, happy. It's just good times. But again, now hearing you say that, hey, man, this was not just one generation. He brought these guys over to show us, how the tunes really, that's really special, man. I don't want to be too nostalgic, but what do you miss about those days? And I know there's a lot of good that happened there that maybe you wish that you could maybe impart to this generation that you're encountering. Are there any lessons that just stick out in your mind right away that you learned then that you feel like folks could really benefit from, new musicians on the scene?
Yeah, I have to say, I miss, other than just missing those guys, because just their presence. It's like I always want to say they don't make them like they used to or this or that, but it's like next thing I know, I'm like, those guys was my mentors and that generation. They're all gone now, and it's like I don't know. It's like it's hard to realize that I'm that I'm that there now, almost there. Where that was, just, I feel like, damn, the time went by so fast. I can't believe it. I'm like, a lot of those guys I was playing with, they were older than me, and they were like I worked with Junior Cook and worked with a lot of those cats, and they were like, just seemed like, they seemed old to me, but they were like in their 50s and shit, or 40s. I'm like, damn, they wasn't really even that old. You know what I mean? And they were so wise. And I was just trying, I wish I would have just like really documented a lot of the shit that I got from them, for the question of what do I wish I could, take from that for younger kids. I mean, the only thing I can think of is I think the younger generation, they need to be like seeking this knowledge. It's just like I'm telling this to you. You're interested, and I know not just for the interview or stuff, but you're truly interested in this. And I just wish more musicians, young musicians were like that. It's like when I do talk sometimes to some of them, like I'm talking to you, I'm giving away jewels. When I say I don't mind it, but when I see how they don't even really it's like I'm talking to the wall sometimes. They don't be truly, like, a lot of them don't even be truly that interested or curious enough to even ask about this or that. And then just the knowledge of being with these guys and the way they conducted themselves, that's a lesson in itself, in the way they went about, how it was a different time. And it's like now a lot of young guys, they're not like my generation, because I was like looking up to all those older cats, man. They took me under their wing, like Clifford Jordan and all these guys that I played with. Like I played with mostly all the old masters more than I did my generation. I didn't play that much with guys my age or younger, because I figured even then they're gonna be around, or let me go with the guys who's still here. They're not gonna be here later, like Shirley Horn and a lot of people. And I learned a lot from them. But they don't think like that nowadays. Like the young kids, if they get some kind of stuff going on, they're gonna just, stick with they're gonna call their buddy up and they're gonna just do it like that. And then it's not gonna be have that wisdom in the songs and the music, man. It's just gonna be all these young guys, their little school, their little small years, of experience in the music. You know what I mean? Like I had to give credit to like Joe Farnsworth. When we were coming up, Joe Farnsworth, he hired all these bad cats, and they weren't even working back then. I mean, you probably don't know this, but guys like Harold Mayburn, Junior Cook, Cecil Payne, I could go down and list a few of them. They was like, some of them had day jobs. Harold Mayburn was working down in the garment district. But I'm saying he pulled them out to woodwork. He was smart enough to do that and hired them. And like we used to play at a place called Augie's. This is where Smokey is now. And the guy who bought it, he was just, well, I ain't gonna get into all that, but he ended up buying it. But when it was Augie's, it was just a little greasy, little kind of, a lot of college students from Columbia would come there. But we would go there and play, pass the hat, this and that. But Joe Farnsworth, he would be calling Junior Cook, and then later on it was Cecil Payne. And he would put it under their name. He wasn't like Joe Farnsworth featuring Junior Cook. It would be like Junior Cook quartet. And he did that a lot. There's some stuff that he posted something that him and I did. We did it with Junior Cook and Cecil Payne together.
Oh, wow. I gotta find that.
Yeah, oh man, and they're killing it. And it was me and Joe. It was Brad Meldau was on piano on some of the stuff, and then I did stuff with Harold Mayburn, and then they started recording. I think with Del Crow, what's that label in Chicago?
Oh, Delmark?
Delmark, yeah. They had some kind of hookup, Eric Alexander and all of them. And I used to be in that circle playing with those cats all the time for a long time, because I used to live across the street from there. And then they would use me, and eventually I started doing other stuff. They started using John Orr, John Orr.
Yeah, with Monk and Rod.
Yeah, but he brought all these guys back out. They wasn't heard of, they had been forgotten about. And their whole careers took off using their name, like the Joe Farnsworth, they wouldn't even probably even have their name on it, you know, which was like, they were really trying to like show the respect, you know, that's how I looked at it. And then when I came back to New York in 2011, I saw those guys still were playing with Harold Mayburn, still, you know, all the ones who were still alive, because they loved those cats, man. And those guys had big careers by then, not just Joe Fosworth, but Harold Mayburn, you know, he was working like his ass off before he passed away, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
all those guys, when they were just coming back, that was a move of respect to me, to bring those cats out. And it wasn't about no ego or their name. They didn't even have their name on the bill. You know, it was just like that. So I know I'm kind of getting off the question, but it goes to the fact that the young cats need to be having that kind of feeling for the older guys like myself now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of there's so much information I could give them, and it would be definitely, you know, good for them in life and in music, you know, and their thing would be good for me. You know, it should be a fair in exchange. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great answer, Tyler. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
wisdom.
And they the ones I can think of, Farnsworth for them, that it really did something like that. But that's a perfect example of what some younger cats can do right now for older cats. Not just give them no gig and put in, not the exact same thing, but something to that effect to show that, you know, they could, you know, put them, be selfless about it and be able to get some, do something, a fair exchange, and put, they would benefit too. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, no, that's great, man. I like that answer. I wanted to ask you before we go to the new project, because we're going to get to the new project that you just produced, but I want to ask you a little bit about Mexico. You decided to leave the United States for Mexico for several years, and you played down there. Can you share, you know, with us, you know, did New York reach its kind of expiration for you? You were kind of done with it. You needed to do something else for a while. Just kind of what led to that progression, if you could share.
Yeah. Well, what led to it? I was I had my ex-wife had some good. She was Puerto Rican, but she had some Mexican friends that lived in Mexico, and these, you know, they came to New York and hung out and saw me play, and we got to be friends. He said, come to our house in Mexico when you ever have a vacation or something. So we went, and this was in San Miguel de Allende. That's a little north of Mexico City. So we went there. That's when I saw they had about 2 or 3 restaurants and clubs. And so we went down there one year, and I had such a good time that the next year they had a jazz festival there, and they invited me to come. Now I was kind of going through some marital problems by this time, so it was good that I take a little break from family separation. So I went down there really just to stay, you know, a few months or something. And then when I got there, it just was so beautiful there. And these people, they had, you know, they had music, like they had 2 or 3 bands playing in their restaurants a day, the mariachi kind of music. They had some of this and that, and they wanted some jazz. So I went down there and started playing. I did the festival, and then this was in the wintertime. And I just really I hooked up with this Cuban piano player, Gabriel Hernandez. He used to play with Chucho Valdez and play with a lot of people, and I just started getting into it there, and I was kind of burned out from New York.
Yeah.
And I was had just been coming through some other changes I was dealing with. So I was trying to take a vacation from New York, but it ended up being years because I was enjoying it, and I really kind of helped put jazz on the map there. You know, they have a club in Mexico City called Zinco. It's like designed after the Zinc Bar. Remember the Zinc Bar here? Mm-hmm. And so they had the same vibe. So I would play there a lot. And then where at the town I was living in, San Miguel, is a small town, but a lot of Americans, artists and writers would migrate there. And the cost of living was so much lower. You know, I'm paying like $200, $250 a month for rent, you know. And the gigs, everything would be cheaper. So that's why you don't hear about people going to Mexico to do no gigs, because say if you go there, the amount of money you're gonna get paid would be a joke. You come back to the States with it. But it's good if you stay in there, if you live in it, then the money, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, different cost of living.
I might make like about $50 on the gig when I got there, but it's like the same equivalent to, $100, $120 maybe, everything was on. So anyway, I just went there and just started enjoying it. And I started connecting with a couple of bands, in jazz, and we started. One of my friends from Canada had a recording studio in his house. So I was doing a lot of recording through him, and then I started doing a lot of traveling all over Mexico. Cancun, going to Puerto Vallarta, going to Veracruz. Then I spent some time living in Oaxaca, and it just was a whole another scene. I just dug it, and the time went by, and but then before my mother passed, she was like saying, you got to get back to New York, it ain't over yet, I'm trying to act like I'm retiring and I'm just like 40 years old or something. Come on, I got more work to do.
Sure.
So even though it was good for me that I made that trip, it was really a time that, that I could have been, I could have been doing a lot more. I could have took off a little bit more in New York, but it was necessary for me to leave. And who knows, if I had stayed here, it would be a different outcome. So I came back at the right time, I feel,
Yeah.
I was gone 10 years or more, 11 years,
Mm-hmm.
to
Well,
Cuba.
man, you've come back with a vengeance. You're a steady presence on the scene. You got your gig back with Sun Ra, and we got to talk about it now. Marshall Allen, 96 years old, right? 97 years old. And you, through the Smalls Foundation, have produced his forthcoming album. You're the producer, you're the bassist on it. Tell me what it's like to be in the producer's chair for somebody like Marshall Allen, who but you've got kind of a conception about how you want to shape this thing.
Exactly. Well, first of all, what do you call it? The award that they got, the Smalls Live produced. It was basically, it turned out to really be for Marshall and me, and I produced it. And in the process of producing it, I took some of the ideas that I got from him, and when I performed with him in the full orchestra, and I just took a lot of the tunes that I wanted to record, and I got a whole section of horn. I had the whole group, like with that big full band. It's a lot of work to try to get everybody, doing their parts and keep it. It was much more cohesive way what I felt, because I had all the parts written out for what the other horns were doing, and I wanted to combine with Marshall's trademark style of playing when he's soloing, combine that with the straight ahead part of the music of Sunrise too. So we got a lot of, shout courses, like it'd be like bop lines, having the horns doing this, harmonizing on that. Meanwhile, Marshall is like blowing his thing all through it. You know what I mean? It's like he knew all those shout courses from back in the 50s and 60s when he was doing them on the records, but he had some fresh stuff he wanted to do on top of it, instead of like Miles. He didn't want to go back and do the same thing he did already. He's always thinking about a new approach. So I just combined them together, and it came out really beautiful. And Marshall, he even tackled some songs that he hadn't played before. Like I did a Thelonious Monk song, Skippy.
Yeah.
And I put that James Brown beat on it, So I wanted to put the whole about the funk, with the Bob Monk shit, and Marshall blowing his thing, right? Oh man, you got to hear this. I can't say nothing, but it was like the meeting of all the different worlds and minds. And then he plays that EVI as well, the electric horn.
Yeah, Huey thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I had it in my tape, my CD player. I was going to play some while we talk, but I didn't want to get in the way of the conversation. But you're going to enjoy this when I'm just wondering. I got some stuff that I know would be good for BGO. Sometimes seems like they kind of go a little more commercial sometimes, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Depends on what time you listen to it, right?
Right. Well, man, I've always believed that there was just room for it all. It's just kind of like, there's a continuum, of Black American music that reaches out and is inclusive of so many different things. And when I
Absolutely.
heard you guys were teaming up for this, I got excited because, I wanted to hear, you not just as the bassist, but as kind of the producer, the idea man, and to see how Marshall, will react to like the backgrounds and the different arrangements that you guys have set forward. I'm excited, man. I'm really excited about it.
Did you hear anything played back from Smalls? Like we recorded in the daytime, but in the nighttime we played 2 sets. Did you ever listen to any of that?
I heard some of it as it was happening. I was tuned in,
Oh,
and
you
I
was
was,
listening to
yeah,
it.
I was watching,
Okay.
yeah, and it was great, especially that rhythm section, man, that you guys had, the hand drums plus the set players. That was pretty cool,
Yeah,
giving that extra
yeah,
oomph.
yeah. I knew with this music, I need to have some percussion as well. You know, have to fill in all that space. So you heard some of it, yeah? 'Cause we did 2 sets, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I don't know. I probably played all my favorite stuff the first set, but I think the second set was happening too, though.
absolutely, man,
Yes,
absolutely. Well,
yes.
Tyler, man, this is I'm gonna get you to hang on the line for a second. But again,
Mhm.
congratulations on this record's coming out. I know folks are gonna be excited about it, not just the history of Mr. Allen, but hearing you with him in this context is gonna be really exciting. So man, it's been my pleasure getting a chance to talk to you today, my man.
Thank you so much for having me too, Greg. Thank you very much. And I'll keep in touch with you and keep you posted, okay?
That's a plan.
Feel
That's a
free to
plan.
call me anytime,
That's a
right?
plan, my man.
All right now. Take care, babe.